What's up YouTube? This is Dave Thomas from Savage Glory Photography, and for my first video I thought that I would share this picture that I found at an estate sale near my house recently in Hollywoodland, and it actually has some interesting things about it that a modern day photographer could learn from. So just to start from the beginning, I was at an estate sale near my house in Hollywoodland, near the Hollywood Hills in California, and I came across this because I was looking at the frame, and I thought it had a very distinctive looking, interesting looking frame that actually could really fit well with some of the wet plate photography that I've been getting into this summer. So I bought it from the company that ran the estate sale, and I didn't really know anything about the person who was selling who had lived at this house where this estate sale was held. I came across an old passport indicating somebody had immigrated here from Germany back in the 1950s or something, a very long time ago, and so I just assumed that this is a picture of the relative, of some kind of a distant relative of theirs. And as I'd gone through the estate sale and looking at the various items that were being sold, it was, it actually made me kind of sad, because I realized that, this was somebody that had lived by themselves for a long time, and for whatever reason they were no longer able to live by themselves anymore. Either they'd passed on, or they had moved to somewhere, some kind of a care facility. But I was able to pick up this frame in the photo for very little. So if you look closely at this, the woodworking has some small scratches, but you can tell that it was done by a craftsman. The brass is pitted, but might just need to be cleaned up. We'll see about that. Now, if you look at this, it has this dull brown background. Either the image had faded, or the paper had gone bad, or maybe it hadn't been fixed correctly, or it had gotten damaged by not using acid-free backing paper. But there are lots of people that had been at the estate sale. They saw the same piece and they passed, because it just looks like an old family picture in kind of rough shape. The glass is dusty, it's gross, you couldn't see the photo all that well. And what's even weirder is you look at the eyes and they look like they're drawn on with a marker. So unless you're a relative, who wants it? When I brought it home in a box full of other dusty stuff, my wife wasn't really surprised, but she wasn't particularly pleased either. So as I started taking it apart, thinking I'll just toss this derelict old black and white photo, did you see these funny picture hanging rings holding the wire? My instinct right away was that this looks like the real deal. It's not a modern attempt at a reproduction. So then, as I started taking it apart, I noticed these cool little nails holding the back. They're an odd shape, so I'm using this magnetic holder so I can keep them in the same order when I put them back together. Look at the shape, at the square shape of these nails. And these oval heads. I did some research and I found these are pre-industrial era handmade nails. Nails were handmade until sometime around 1890, when they started to be made in large scale in factories. So I took some of the nails off to remove the back, and the photos is held in by this carefully cut sheet of real hardwood. I talked to somebody that knows about woodworking, and he said that basically this is you can tell one of the side was cut with a large circular saw, and the other side is cut by a band saw. So it's just kind of funny how they used to cut this type of large sheets of thin wood back in those days. So then, to remove the back, and now to get a better look, you can see this is a real vintage tintype. And what's crazy is that I've started doing tintype photography this summer, And I didn't even realize that this itself was a tintype until I took off the frame. Tintypes were the state-of-the-art in photography from 1850 to about the 1870s. Then came the dry plate era, then came film. The tape, if you can see, is all matted, moldy, and broken, so I'm thinking as I touch this, I better wash my hands. And now the back of the tintype is stained with the chemicals a photographer used for this process. Now, if this had been glass, the photographer would have cleaned off the back, but since it's tin, then there's no need to clean it because nobody's going to see the back of the photo. So I scanned the plate on my flatbed scanner at about 2400 dpi, and now I can see this in a lot more detail. In this background to the left, there's a flower close-up or some kind of a tree branch in there. So my first question was, how did the photographer get this oval shape to it? At first I thought it was some kind of a thin mask over the film holder, but then would it have been black or would it have been white? And I got confused a little bit about whether this is a negative or if it's a reversal, which, would it have been more white if it had gotten more exposure? So if not, maybe he covered up the center and exposed the rest of sunlight, but I doubt that because that would have really made a mess. So how it's done is still a mystery. So if you know, maybe, post in the comments and if you think you have an idea of how it was made. So now for a close-up, you can get a really good look at the medallion and the details of her face. The lighting's really beautiful. This photographer clearly had a lot of skills. And back in these days, the only light source that everybody ever really used was sunlight. So this had to be done during a specific time of day in sunlight. And if you look, it has a very, very soft lighting over the face, very even, and it's really quite beautiful. The photographer, as you can see, scratched off some of the emulsion. If you look at a close look at her eyes, now you can see how the eyes are done. The photographer clearly scratched off some of the emulsion while it was still wet. So one-plate collodion is extremely detailed, but it's impossible to get people to stand completely still for 5 to 10 minutes without moving. So I guess this is maybe how this artist solved blurry eyes. He painted them off with a needle or maybe a toothpick. Now, let's look at the medallion, which might be painted in gold. My wife's an artist, and she said it didn't look like gold leaf because you can see the brush strokes. Were there gold paints in those days that left untarnished for 150 years? I don't know what kind of material would do that. Here in the corner, you can see the signature of the artist. Lan, L-A-N. By the way, it's scratched. I can tell it was dry when they signed it. Let me put these side by side with some tintype experiments I made recently. On the left, I use your typical ammonium thiosulfate rapid fixer, which is a non-hardening rapid fixer. Then I use a non-rapid fixer, which is a sodium thiosulfate fixer. And finally, way over on the right side, I have a Kodak fixer that's intended for color film, and it's thiocyanate based. My guess is this was fixed with cyanide. The agents that I use don't produce this coffee and cream look that you get with cyanide, but then they won't kill you like cyanide will. I thought that I would make this video because it could be an interesting reference to other artists who are making tintype photography, or really anybody that has an interest in how classic photos were made. If you have any comments, if you have any ideas on maybe how this was made, or you find you know more about this than I do, then feel free to leave me a comment in the comments, and also subscribe if you want to see some of my future videos.